Hey you, good morning, Mark.
Hey, Marcus. Good day to you. Nice to be back.
Always good to be, and good to be with you. Always.
Yes, and it's
Um,
starting to feel like a Friday afternoon routine for me. Here it's afternoon, end of the week, catch up with my friend Marcus, talk about,
hey,
our dear friend Kenna and Amar and his friends. What better way to end the week?
yeah, yeah. It was a routine for us to show up on a Thursday usually, yeah, and then exchange ideas as we watched Kenna and his band of friends progress. And yeah, now we publish or this video on a Friday. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. No, it's
But
great. So
yeah,
here we are, chapter 5. And the title of the chapter is A Quiet Revolution in Room 202. So,
hmm,
yeah, that's going to be our focus today.
okay,
And there's a really nice take on this quiet revolution, I think. There's sort of two levels to that we're going to explore today, the quiet
all right.
revolution. So maybe I can just
Tell.
set this,
Mhm.
yeah, just to set this up, where does the chapter take place? Where does this fit into the broader story? So this is last week we introduced Professor Amar,
Mm-hmm.
and we got a feel for his slightly unconventional approach to teaching and how it seemed to intrigue the students. And this
Mm.
week we're going to continue with Amar, and he's now giving a lecture. To any, it's an open lecture to any
Yeah.
student who is interested, and he's sort of sharing his vision about the future of education. And so how
Mm.
he sees education moving forward. And, of course, his vision is very much rooted in the need for more focus on the human aspect, the human dimension, understanding ourselves, who we are, our gifts, and the role
Mm.
we can play in the world. In addition to, of course, the more standard aspects of education that we're all familiar with. So yeah, that's sort of the core focus of the chapter, and it ends with this idea that he sees something in Kenna that Kenna is not able to see in himself yet. So we're going to talk about this whole idea of seeing potential in others, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a very important theme here in this chapter. And
So
yeah,
there are also two parts of the chapter, right? Because in the lecture, Ken also brings up the idea of SDGs, or sorry,
IDGs,
IDG,
yeah,
inner development goals.
yes,
And the inner development goals are also to match the sustainable or outer development goals.
exactly.
And it ends with Kenna in his
Room,
dorm room, and he finds a poem that Rosie wrote for him. So Rosie is a poet, and
yeah.
that also talks about his potential. Um, yes, and we'll give you a taste of the poem this morning.
Lovely. Lots of good stuff here to explore.
All right.
So maybe we can start with this quote that gives a
Mm-hmm.
sense of Amar's vision and how he's looking at education.
All right. Go for it.
Yeah. So if you allow me, I'll just read it out. And if you
Mm.
can move the images of us because it's blanking out some of the text.
Yeah, I see that right
There we
now.
go. Perfect. Thank you.
Go for it.
So this is Amar. Um, of course, we need people trained with technical aptitudes, Amar conceded. But we also need graduates prepared to navigate life's big challenges and lead lives of purpose, meaning, and character. Why, you may ask? Because we are on the verge of a new frontier. Exponential technologies like AI, quantum computing are rapidly disrupting many aspects of our lives, leaving some feeling alienated, anxious, and uncertain of why we are here. I mean, just ask yourself, Are you getting the most out of your education?
He poses a question back.
Pretty thought
What
provoking. Yeah.
what does that rise for you? What thoughts come for you? Yeah.
Well, I've been sitting with this question of, has every generation gone through this? Is there anything really different to this younger generation?
Mm,
And the yearning for meaning and purpose, and focusing more on self-awareness, self-development. Has this always been like this? you know when we were young, did our parents also have similar sort of existential questions when they were that age? Or is there something truly different about this period that we're living in today, that things are really accelerating, and that these technologies are really disrupting what it actually means to be human, and the role that humans will have in the future, and how we can continue to add value, right, in a society where artificial intelligence, quantum computing, all of these very disruptive technologies are it's not a question of if they're going to happen, it's more when, and how much impact they're going to have. So I've actually been sitting with this question: are we really truly living through transformational times, or is it the same kind of thing that every generation faces? And I'm curious how you think about that.
well, I was going to ask you, what did you come up with in your thoughts? um, you know, it's same but different. The human experience has always been revelation. I hear you say add value. I like to think of it's revealing value. That's what education is, bringing forth what is already in there, and that's us talking about the potential of others, right? Um, Technology speeds that up, and I think we're coming into a realization of that quicker. So the game has changed, yet it's always the same, not result, but it's to the same end. Know thyself. It's just that now, and we talked
Mm.
about this, screens are pulling our awareness out of ourselves to other narratives and other stories that aren't necessarily true, or a narrative is a narrative, but it's creating beliefs that aren't really reflective, I think, of the true essence of humanity, which is to serve others, which is to take care of the community for us to flourish. And that's
Mm.
what the value is, that we have to reveal that true character, that human character. I mean, and that's my assumption, that's my belief, that that's where the beauty of humanity lies. But can we get technology to actually reveal that those inner characters? Those are
Yeah.
my thoughts. I said a
Yeah.
lot there.
Yeah. No, definitely same but different. Same but different. I think that's very true. The same
Mm,
yearning, but the context is different. And
mhm.
I think that that's what Professor Amar is trying to get at. Is that we are living in disruptive, transformational times, and that is having an impact on how we need to think about education. And it's not the first time that we're re-questioning the purpose of education, or we're re-looking at it. It's just another one of those moments where it's becoming very important to do so. And so he's taking, I think, quite uh, a strong stand for that. And it feels a little bit like a revolution, right? It is shaking things up. So the title, "A Quiet Revolution" in room 202, seems quite appropriate.
That will take us on to our next notable quote, because you'll share a notable quote and then I'll share another one. You actually
Yes.
requested that I share this one.
Yeah.
Please set us up for it.
Well, towards the end of the chapter, Kenna and Amar have an exchange.
Hmm.
And Kenna is actually quite surprised, because Amar is seeing something in him. He's seeing a depth in Kenna, right? The
Hmm.
student, Kenna, that Kenna may sense, but hasn't acknowledged that in himself yet. And Amar is actually inviting him and encouraging him to think about leading events like this, that encourage deeper dialogue, conversation. And Kenna's very surprised by that. He's like, "What? Me? I can't do this. This is not, I'm studying engineering. This is not who I am." And yet, Professor Amar sees that and is
Mm,
putting it out there. And so, this idea that other people sometimes can see potential in us before we can see it in ourselves, or even more than we can see it in ourselves, I think is a very interesting um, theme in this chapter, and something that I recognize quite often in the coaching work that I do as well. Right? Is
hmm
that's the value that we provide as coaches. Really, one of the key values is we see the potential in somebody, and
mm,
before they're able to recognize it in themselves, and just mirroring it back, being able to be that mirror for them, they can then go like, "Wow, actually, yeah, what you're saying is true," or "I've taken it for granted, but I can see how that actually might be something to pay more attention to." And so the next quote, which I would love for you to share, is actually a poem, and it's a
hey,
poem that Rosie has
hmm
written for Kenna a while back. And
hmm
Kenna rediscovers this poem as he's reflecting on this lecture and everything that has happened in the conversation with Amar. And he finds this poem again, and it lands in a much more profound way than maybe it did when he first received it. So,
hey, boom.
yeah,
Nothing to it, but just to do it. Let's read it. It's before we read it. It's worth noting also that in the coaching work that we do, it's in alignment with the desires of the coachee, and I think they see it too. It's just us walking along with them to bring it out, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Because Kenna is longing to have an understanding too. Kenna's like, engineering's not for me, or this path of engineering is not mine,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, let's read the poem. Excuse the size. Now, a little note. This was originally written based on a Ray Bradbury quote, but it's very quick. It's called "The World Awaits Your Brilliance." The world awaits for your brilliance to unfold, to take hold of the godlike work you've been given. The only question is, are you willing? And before you answer, don't think. Because thinking will be the enemy of your creativity. Rather, just do. Move. To the challenge of this time, find a journey worthy of your heart and soul so you can do what you are capable of without apology, without excuse. Just go. Boom. Yeah, that's it.
Beautiful.
The world
Beautiful.
awaits for your brilliance to unfold, to take hold of the work you've been given.
Mm.
Y- You know, that was originally inside this book here, Words of Well-Being, and I'll tell you more about this book in a later podcast. But it's inspire life, then you empower life, and then you make an impact on life. It's part of a 3-part series, and yeah, there's no greater privilege than to be who you are, and in that, understand the world is waiting to bring it out from you, as well as like the world's inviting you, as well as it's pushing out from you, and that's what education is.
Mm.
Again, parenting.
Both.
It's
Yeah.
it's all that emergence. Oh
Yeah.
man, what were your thoughts on it? How did it land for you?
Yeah. I really like that it is, a two-way process. There's something coming through us that wants to come out, and there's something inviting us. And there can be blocks in both areas. Like, you can have situations where there's something really coming through, but our environment is not seeing it, not encouraging it, and it feels like there's a kind of a block. Or it could be that the environment is really encouraging, but we're not ready, and there's something blocking within us. And then, of course, there can be when both are aligned, right? When there's an inner emergence, and there's a
Mm.
context that is ready to invite it. And I think that that's what's happening with Kenna right now. There's an inner readiness, and there's an environment, especially with Professor Amar and his friends, that are seeing it and inviting him. And so he's really in this moment where the things are coming together.
Hmm.
Uh,
What's that?
what there's one part of that poem that kind of speaks really true to me, and it's that thinking is the enemy of your creativity, something like that.
Mm.
Thinking is the
Hmm.
enemy of your creativity. Just go, right? Just move. And it really speaks to me because the the soul,
It's too small.
the yearning of
Continue.
the soul is that our reason, our mind, our rational mind cannot explain it, right? We cannot think our way up. We can't always make sense of it, and yet it's coming through. So if we try to over intellectualize something, then we're going to be blocking it. And so this idea of just trust, just go, just move, and make sense of it afterwards, right?
Hmm.
Step into it, make sense of it afterwards, I think is really important when it comes to that emergence from within.
Mm. You know, I well, are you open to another perspective?
Always, always.
Oh,
That's what we
I
do. That's what we do.
I have to preface everything with that person, right? But
Yeah.
so it's an idea from a woman called Lisa Miller, and she was talking. If you're familiar with internal family systems, this is not that, but she says in you there's a council, there's a logical thinker, there's a skeptic, there's a mystic, there's an
Hmm.
intuitive person, and there's another one I can't remember. But they're all sitting around and they hear something at the door. And when they hear something at the door, the council then talks about it and says, do we allow it in or do we not?
Hmm.
Um, I absolutely agree with you that there are moments when we need to put thinking aside. And then there's also the strategic person that you keep on the team, as well as there is the skeptic person who questions. We
Hmm.
verify yet, we'll trust yet verify.
Hmm.
I think that's why we're invited to collaboration, because there are moments where it's just like, oh yeah, there's the doer, boom, boom, the person who gets it done. And then there's also the visionary person who sets the vision. That's why we're invited to work in collaboration. And that's why. So yeah, yes, and like yeah, there are times when it's just like, hey, let's just put away all this thinking and let's be at full potential. Your company, right? Be and then do, regardless of the habit. Be and do, be and do. But then there are times when this strategy is necessary. But yeah, you froze on me, sir. Are you still there? Is that me on my side? All right, Mark. I don't know if you're still with us. Um, okay, your video dropped, and that's all right. Hello, Marie. I see you there. I don't expect you to come on camera unless you want to. Okay, I can't hear you, but that's all right. The sh- the show will go on. Hey,
We
Mark.
must go on.
The show must go on. Let's for these last 10 minutes, we can look at our final topic, right? You wanted to set that up for us?
Yeah, so I think we've been talking about this seeing potential in others, and why is it sometimes easier than seeing it in ourselves?
Hmm. Yeah, you actually
And
posed a question. Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Um,
do you
set.
have any thoughts on this, Marcus?
I, I do. I feel like I gave a nice little. I do have thoughts on it. I would love to hear yours. I'd love to listen. I do have
Okay,
thoughts. I do have thoughts.
okay. So So one thing that's coming up for me right now is I think other, people around us
Mm-hmm.
somehow have maybe a bit more fresh eyes that they can look at our essence through maybe more of a fresh lens than we
Mm-hmm.
can ourselves, right? To take a step back and to be able to see who we are with a little bit of distance is not that easy. And with
Mm-hmm.
objectivity, right? I think we do bring our subjectivity to how we see ourselves, right? And our limits and sort of the constraints and all the conditioning, all of that is brought into our own self perception. Whereas people around us will look at it in a more neutral, more objective way and just kind of go like, wow, I see something here that's really cool. And we may go, that's, we take it for granted. That's just kind of, yeah, part of our daily thing, right? And so we don't see maybe the brilliance in it as much anymore, unless we actually are able to take a step back and see it with a little bit of that freshness as well again. So that's what's coming up for me, that we're so deep into sort of the routine of living and just being
Mm-hmm.
that we miss out on the uniqueness, and the beauty of perhaps what it is. So having witnesses, having those mirrors in our lives and people that we collaborate with, friends, family, that once in a while can remind us of what does make us unique. I think it's very powerful.
Mm. All right. T- two things are coming up for me. Do you ever remember what was the name of that Pixar movie where there was a jazz musician and there was a little thing looking for its spark? Do you remember the movie I'm talking about?
No.
I'm gonna kick myself. That's all right. But from what it sounds like you're saying to you, like a person is so close to just their natural routine of something, they don't
Yeah.
get that outside perspective.
Yeah.
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 I, I think as educators and as parents and people, because we have life experience, we can see the potential of the path on where this person can go.
Mm.
This person has, let's say, three paths ahead of in front of them.
Hmm.
We can share our vision with them. However, again, we always want to be in alignment, and it has to emerge. People do move towards our expectations, but then it's just like they have to own it. Like they have to take it as
Hmm.
their own. So we can hold beliefs for them until they take on the beliefs, and we create the environment as well as giving them evidence and examples as to how and why that could happen.
Yeah.
That's if we want to shape
Yeah.
it. That said, we also have to trust what comes forth.
Yeah.
Like you have
Yeah.
to receive what's coming forth. Because
Mhm.
if you don't receive what's coming forth, that in itself is can be a
Yeah.
blockage, and nothing's wrong with blockage. That just means it's a redirection, and that's how stories happen.
Mhm. And would you consider that as also a bit of a quiet revolution? That listening to our own potential and acknowledging it and allowing it to emerge within us, is that revolutionary in a sense?
Always, like change is the only constant of life.
Yeah.
Now watch this. Some people, man, watch this, Mark. This is beautiful. Sometimes we look at kids and there's a timeline we put them on, and that comes from the industrial age, especially with knowledge workers. Like there's a timeline we put on people. But if we're talking about development, sometimes they're redwoods, and redwoods take centuries to grow. Then there's also bamboo. which you can actually visually see after it lays latent in the ground for 7 years. Then it just bursts up. And you can
Mhm.
actually see it grow inches in a day. The beauty about full potential, being at full potential, the beauty about the inner developments, it's seeing the full potential in the person, creating the environment for them,
Mm.
trusting them, creating that. That's how a redwood grows in Northern California. That's how bamboos grow in China. It's recognizing the context of the thing and honoring life and creating
Mm.
life for it to flourish.
Mm.
So there's no timeline we can give it.
Yeah.
There are things we can do to nurture it and to help it along. But we have to have compassion, care,
Yeah.
and create the environment for it to flourish.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's beautifully said. The reason why I felt
Yes,
like maybe
please.
there's something revolutionary in it is
Mm,
that when that flourishes, when the flourishing comes through, right? When the bamboo all of a sudden starts to shoot, it will look very different
yeah.
than what other people are expecting of us sometimes, right? Whether it be our close friends, family, um, employer, colleagues, they have a certain vision of us, but when that blooming starts and all of a sudden we
Mm,
start bringing more of who we are into our lives, we can look and appear and come across, um, in ways that are not always what other people are expecting of us or what they want from us, even. And so,
mm,
in that respect, I think living into our potential, allowing that blooming to take place, is an act of revolution as well. It's an act of taking a stand for who we are,
mm.
irrespective of how the world around us is going to react to it. So, that's where I think the two levels are, right? So you have Professor Amar taking a stand for a vision for education and kind of
Hmm.
inciting a bit of a revolution amongst the students. And then you have that inner process of emergence that's happening in Kenna, which is also revolutionary in a sense.
Yeah. It in every story you need conflict, right? And and Professor Amar is speaking against. He's not really even against anything. He's pro
Yes,
these
exactly.
ideas.
Yes.
They are seemingly against something, but he's like, no, this is what I'm about, and it's
Yes.
very agency driven.
Yeah.
And Kenna, his internal conflict is that of him and his father, his voice with his
Yeah.
father,
Yeah.
the expectation, societal expectations. This is what kids and adolescents go through, trying to figure out the world while figuring out themselves. But when you have what Angela Duckworth calls a psychologically wise person with them, they can navigate it better to understand this is what the work is. Having that revolution, having those changing of beliefs. So yeah, we'll see where the story goes. Because I mean, that's what happens in a story. Change. A story is change happens, and we give it meaning. So
Yeah.
boom.
Yeah. This is beautiful, Marcus. I think we're getting toward the end of our half an hour here, and it's flew by once again.
Boom.
Any closing thoughts, remarks?
Um, two. One is it's called the quiet revolution, right? There's the idea of latent energy, like ice will melt at 100 degrees, or it'll change states at this temperature. We have to trust the process as we're putting stuff in there,
Hmm.
as we're putting heat in there. Trust the process that change will come. And just our relationship. And we always used to start and end with stuff like that. Like we would have never known we would have been on a podcast talking. But there was one day I said, hey, I see this in you. You see it in me with our works we exchanged. What do you want to work on? You fed into my life. I've fed into yours. And that's where transformation has happened. So, yeah, be intentional with the change and trust the change as it happens, as you trust yourself.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yourself. What do you want to end with?
Yeah. Just to set up for next week. So we're
Oh,
moving to chapter 6.
Okay.
And I'm looking at the title of chapter 6, and it's called "The Weight of a Father's Dream." The
Mm,
weight of a father's dream. So, this actually is aligning really well with what we were talking about in terms of that inner revolution that Kenna is going through, right? The allowing that authentic voice to come through and the impact that it has on the outer relationships, and specifically in this case, the relationship with his father, which is an
mhm.
important one to Kenna. And so, yeah, it's kind of really leading into this chapter 6, where we're going to get a little bit more insight into that dynamic between Kenna and his father, and the tensions that he's experiencing in that.
Yeah. I remember when we started this, we said it's a book about education, yet it's also about parenting,
Yeah.
because we also have Dean and his daughter. And then we often talked about your relationship with your children and then my relationship with my father and so on. So, yeah, looking forward to that.
Beautiful.
Next week, you want to do it all again?
We'll do it all again. Yeah, this is one of favorite parts of my week, Marcus.
Hey,
So thank you.
right back at you, sir. So, everyone watching, thank you for being on the replay. Um, looking forward to this book coming out, and thank you for being on the journey. That's it.
Thank you very much. Till next week.
Peace.